Sia, the floor is yours.
I really felt like silencing you, pal, but I'm too polite. You guys, I'm Sia. I'm an alcoholic too. What a great meeting you have. I love the setup. I love the things you share to remind us of what we're doing here and draw people in. It kind of brings tears to my eyes. I love AA and I'm glad to be here with you. Let me put my timer on so I don't go over, so you don't write my name on the bottom of your shoes, you know what I mean? So my sobriety date's January 30th, 1983, thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous. And this was my third time in AA. I missed the bus a couple of times. And I did underestimate this illness. And I am a recovering know-it-all. So, I remember when I first came, hey, if there's anybody here who's new, I want to welcome you. And this is a great meeting. I can tell I go to great meetings myself and they got it going on. It's a place where I could live. That's the thing. That's why the third time was different. Not only could I not stop drinking, I knew I was going to die of it. That put a whole different spin on this situation. And before that, we talk about we have an allergy of the body and an obsession of the mind. I don't know if you're new and you've heard that lingo, but when I heard it, I thought, you know what? I know when I drink, I get an allergy for my boyfriend and an obsession for yours. Give the book to somebody that needs it. I'm all over this. And I thought I was. It's a sad thing. I mean, I'm having fun with you all, and I love that. But there was a time I was making jokes, and it was with a lower companion called alcoholism. I didn't know how much trouble I was in. And I was in that tangible trouble that we get in. But let me just tell you what I used to be like before that. I grew up in an alcoholic home. It ain't why I'm alcoholic, but I was around it and I saw it, and there was nothing about it that recommended it to me. The alcoholic in my home was my father, and look, I love alcoholic men. I find you charismatic. I've dated way too many of you and married quite a few of you, so I should know, I think. And my dad was this great big good looking guy, and but when he drank, he became what we become sometimes. And the thing about my father that is interesting is we use this word powerless. If you're new here, that's a weird word to me, and it was a weird word to me because my father said he was alcoholic. If that's what it was that was wrong with him, I was on board with that. But powerless, no way. Because my dad, at the time he lived on this planet, I would say was like one of 17 people his size. My dad was 6'7". My dad played All-American college ball in Madison Square Garden. He was a gifted athlete. He got attention in newspapers, but he was an alcoholic. And it ain't personal, this illness. It just removes us. And my father got removed, and I too got removed. We get removed from our car if we're driving drunk. We ain't the only people driving drunk, maybe, but we get removed. And I don't know about you, but if I don't pay the rent or I can't make the car payment, they take the car, I get removed from the place. I don't show up for the relationship, I get removed. I was just getting removed and getting removed, and it's a terrible thing when you can't stop something you don't want to be doing anymore. And that was part of my living problem. I did not know I had a living problem. It is where I got sober this time. They said, Sia, you don't have a drinking problem, okay? You have a living problem. And here's what I know about that today with a little bit more than 42 years. I'm alive. That's a problem. And I was delighted to get to know Eric. He's clearly alcoholic because we were throwing insults around moments after making contact, having a whole lot of fun. I was telling him the speakers he was booking sucked and, crazy stuff like that. And you can say it to other alcoholics. You say stuff like we say here outside in the regular world. They probably call the guys with the little car and the white coats. And it's just, I love us. You were saying stuff out loud that I was thinking and so ashamed of, or so afraid of, or so, I don't know. You're just my people. Damn, I'm grateful for that. So anyway, that was my dad. I just loved him to death. And here's the thing with me. I want to talk about my spiritual malady because, I drank my way into alcoholism. But alcoholism is a family illness, and there were certain tendencies I had as a kid, spiritual malady, we call it, and I think I had it. First of all, my family are nice looking folks, and I was this tall, skinny thing with buck teeth and scraggly hair. That's actually a quote from a police report, so I ain't embellishing here, And I resented that. But I just didn't identify with my family. And that's the other big word in Alcoholics Anonymous, identification. And I'm going to go back to powerlessness too for a minute, because here's the thing that happened for me, as I told you in my third time in AA. I don't think you can explain powerlessness to somebody who ain't. But I think a person who is powerless, when they're told they're powerless, they don't need anybody to explain it to them. They know. I knew. And the big difference between you and me, speaking of identification, is that you talked about your drinking, you talked about your life when you were a drunk, and I identified with you. And the problem for me was, but the wonderful thing about you was, you weren't drinking. How did you do that? I could throw an expletive in there. I was desperate when I came here this time. And if you're new and you feel desperate, we get it. I get it. I totally get it. And I needed to be at rock bottom to grasp and develop this manner of living. So there I was as a kid, and I'm an alcoholic, and I don't just overdrink. I overmarry. I overlike people who underlike me. I underdress, I oversleep, I overdraft. I'm off in all these, and I'm furious. I'm a very angry person without some spiritual wherewithal. I remember one of the guys I was overmarried to one time said to me, something, I think you actually are the angriest person I have ever met. To which I replied, that makes me angry, because I got nothing with a hole in it, basically. And so I was mad. I was born fed up, I think. And I went to kindergarten and things got worse. And that's because there's these things called people in kindergarten. And you know what? Without a program, I hate people. What are they for? Because they're like looking at you, like you're looking at me. And they're thinking things without my permission. And I know I wouldn't like it if they told me what they were thinking. And in kindergarten, there were like too many of them to kill. You know what I mean? And so that was it. It's over. I want out of here. And there was no exit sign. I found out this is the deal. You got to go through school. You got to go through this grade and that grade. And I gave up right away. I just gave up. I became a disenfranchised kid, I guess is the word. And I'm going to tell you something. Disenfranchised kids, they don't just go along silently. I didn't. I started getting in trouble. I joined a gang. I don't know if anybody else did. I joined this gang, and the problem which AA pointed out to me is that everywhere I went, and then there was a problem. So there was a common denominator there, and I guess it was me. I had a hard time accepting that, but I have come around to your point of view. And so I walk into this gang, and there were some things they weren't doing right. That's how I felt about it. Some gangs have colors. Their colors were ugly. I felt it was important to let them know. They didn't really appreciate that. We have traditions in AA, and that's the word we use, but a lot of organizations have certain ways they do stuff. And so I was like telling them what they were doing wrong. And just so you know how dangerous I am, this gang is also known as Girl Scouts, okay? And here's the thing. If you're a pain in the neck, I don't care if it's Girl Scouts or I don't care what it is, they don't want you around. And so their moment came because if you're not familiar with Girl Scouts, the Girl Scouts has this thing called Girl Scout cookies. It's a big deal to them. And they came to find I was doing something funny with the cookie money. I was like cooking the books. This was a big problem. They didn't appreciate that. So in a general way, I was uninvited to be a Girl Scout. And I have met a lot of people in AA. We should have a little subgroup who've been thrown out of Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Cub Scouts. I love it. I just love it. It's just another way I love AA. But anyway, that was the beginning of a fatal progression. Now you guys have your book and I have my book, so I know that specifically refers to the progression of our drinking. But it could easily have applied to the fact that every organization I became a part of, up to and including my own family, and that I can think of talking to you right now, uninvited me to be in that organization. And that scared me. I wasn't going to admit it. What it boils down to is as people got to know me, they didn't like me anymore. That was a terrible feeling, you know? So I didn't want to drink. I didn't want to drink, but when I was 17 or 18, I was in a local college watering hole. And you know what? I couldn't take it one more second, I guess, as I look back. I felt so not a part of. And you know, the book talks about we are tortured by loneliness. I don't know if you relate to that. I sure do. I just couldn't take one more step. And so I wanted to fit in, and so I had a drink. And it was a beer. It was no big deal, you know. But what I'm going to tell you is I do not know if it was the first sip of this beer or the middle of the glass or the bottom of the pitcher or the bottom of the evening. I don't know. But somewhere along the line, that thing the book talks about and describes as the effect produced, I believe happened in me. And it simply translated into this problem I had all my life of looking at you in kindergarten and looking at you and your family and Girl Scouts and all these other places where I felt like a total stranger. And you looked like you were having the time of your life, and I had a funeral going on in my heart. And that problem, like, packed its bag, put its hat on, and walked out the back door of my life that evening. And so what I'm going to tell you is if you have a problem as big as that one was to me, probably my first obsession. You know, I thought about this day and night, obsession of the mind. You have a problem that big and you find an answer, I bet you're going to get your hands on that answer as often as you can. I did. I was. And so I started to drink as often as I could. I grew up in Montana, and I ended up drinking on the Indian reservations. The reason I drank on the Indian reservations is because I have a couple of ways I behave when I drink, which are not really welcome, I guess I would say. Let me talk about men again. I told you I like men. And here's the thing. I like you a lot, and I think I was born with Adidas on. So if I like you a lot and I've been drinking, why mess around? I don't even need your name. You know, I announce myself. I just take my clothes off. And sometimes my timing is off, like I did that once at a wedding reception. And I was not the entertainment, okay, haha. And so that was not well received. And the other thing I do with men is if you are not receptive to my invitation, I don't know how this came to be a pattern of mine, but I'm chasing you with a knife. And let me tell you something, I don't know martial arts. I never worked at the Benihana restaurant. I don't know how to use a knife any better than your average man. But I'm after this guy with a knife. I won't say it's thousands of them. I don't want to exaggerate, but enough, you know, a pattern, you could say. And I'm telling you, when I came in AA also, I felt like such a victim. I felt like my life was so unfair. And as I have been here with you longer and longer, so many things have looked differently. For example, what I realized one day is, you know, as hard done as I felt about my life, none of those men I chased, not one of them, turned around and called me out and said something like, let's see what you got. Because you know what? I'd have been in trouble there. That did not happen. And I realized, okay, you know what? It wasn't always somebody doing me wrong. It wasn't, you know, there was a chink in the armor that we talk about. When I drink, I think I get hope. That's what I get. I think I'm spiritually bankrupt. It's not a term I would have ever come up with, but AA had it. And I've come to understand how all-encompassing that is. What a death sentence that is for a human being. Forget dying of alcoholism. That aside, not that we'd ever put that aside, but just focusing on that. You know, I just couldn't. And so, I stay out all night because alcohol makes me feel like living. It really does. And I was coming home in the morning, and my parents had separated by this time. And one of my brothers called me out for behaving like this. And I don't know about you, but I don't take that from anybody. I don't care if you're my family. I'll kill you. I'll kill the whole family. And I got in a fist fight with my brother, and my mom had to get between us. And This is when my mom asked me to move on. I don't know if that happened for you. And so I ended up drinking in Beverly Hills. But here's the thing about that part of my story. You know, there's a phrase in the book, whistling in the dark. I know you know it. And how that works for me is, I don't know if I couldn't look at my drinking at that time yet, or I just wasn't gonna. Yes, I was drinking in Beverly Hills, but the full story, you know, all facts on the table were I was drinking at the bus stop, or a bus stop in Beverly Hills. That's kind of a different picture, you know what I'm saying? And I ended up kind of rolling downtown, drinking at this bar. It was called the Good Night. It was not, so I wouldn't look it up if I were you. It was a rough bar, and sometimes when young women drink in rough bars, stuff happens. And in this particular bar, there was another young woman who drank there regularly. I wasn't friends with her. I don't make friends with women when I'm drinking because men are human-sized credit cards to me, you know. But anyway, she ended up with her head blown off in the vacant lot behind the building this bar was located in. Her name was Debbie. And this frightened me, and I'll tell you why it frightened me. I'm a lot like Debbie. When I'm in a bar, in a social situation, I start getting between you and your drink, and then you and your conversation, then you and your meal, you and your date, you and the TV show maybe you're trying to watch. You know, tension, fights break out is what happens. And so what I recognized is that that could be me. And this is when, I don't know when this happened for you, but this is when I started to try to control my drinking. I said to myself, you know, maybe you should chill. Why don't you back off from it a little, okay? Maybe you have had more than your fair share. But this is when something else happened. This is when I started drinking behind my own back now instead of yours. And it's a funny turn of phrase. Sometimes when I say it in live meetings, people, you know, kind of chuckle a little or something. But let me tell you, I've lived a long time sober. And I lived a long time out there, and stuff happens to alcoholic women, and stuff happens to all of us. This ain't about just alcoholic women, but that one I'm intimately familiar with. And of all the things that have happened in my life and all the bad stuff, the worst thing that has ever happened to me and ever will be is the inability to stop drinking when I wanted to. Because, you know, that's what separates man from animal, the right to choose. I didn't have that anymore. Where do you go? Who do you talk to about it, you know? There were a couple of things that propelled me into Alcoholics Anonymous. First of all, we're home because we're Zoom, and I assume you're home too. But if you weren't home and you went home, you would probably notice if your place was tossed. And my place was burglarized, but like I didn't notice for a couple of weeks. I mean, come on, who lives like that? You know, I just hated my guts at that point. In AA, we call it the bondage of self. I just couldn't stand it. And the other thing that happened that propelled me into AA, excuse me, I was looking out of the window of the place where I was living at the time, and I saw this guy walking down the sidewalk with a shotgun. I'm from Montana. I know a shotgun when I see one. And I thought that was pretty out there for a city street, you know? And in retrospect, I think I was lucky or blessed, whatever you want to call it, that I saw this guy, because when he crossed the street, came in the courtyard of my building, and I heard footsteps come up to my stairs, I knew this was the guy with the shotgun standing in front of my door. I didn't know what to do. I only knew to stay real quiet. My mind was racing. You know, Bill Wilson uses that language in his story, because I had seen this guy. I didn't know this guy, so what's he doing at my door? You know, and I wondered if I'd done something to him in a blackout. Is that what he's doing there? Or was it the people I lived with? Because I lived with those kind of people, and they would have been fair to say the same dang thing about me. I didn't know. All I knew was to be real quiet on my side of the door. And it just wasn't my time, because for some reason, I don't know if there was commotion in the courtyard or what, for some reason, I heard footsteps going back downstairs, and this guy walked out of my life. You know what that moment reminds me of when I talk about it? It reminds me of another moment that began to happen to me when I would come to or wake up. I don't know how you characterized it. I started saying to myself, I ain't doing this anymore. I am not going there. I'm turning this around. This is it. I'm not doing it. My life's going to be different. I would say that to myself day after day after day. It never changed. Never changed. You know, I would want to like bash my head against the wall or get run over by a car. I'm talking about obsession of the mind. There's no off button for that thing that I know of. Not at that time. I knew of nothing. And so I was sitting someplace waiting for the obsession of the mind to hit, because that's what ran my life. I don't know what ran yours. And this is when I really needed help. But I am not a helpable person. I'm not. I don't know why that is. All I know is that people before AA tried to help me. There were folks with those little clerical collars, you know, and they would try to help me see life through a different lens, like spiritually, a little more friendly. And then there are the folks with the diplomas on the wall, you know, and they're going to tell you about your feelings and help you with your thinking. Or then there's the ones with the gun and the badge and, okay, I know what you're doing here and let's go. But you know what I knew about every single one of those people? Underneath all that jazz, they're just another lousy human being, just like me, you know? You just ain't going to get anywhere with somebody like that. And here's the remarkable thing for me anyway about AA. I got no defense against the first drink. I guess you don't either. I don't know what you're doing here. But I got no defense against Alcoholics Anonymous either. Because when I came here, I didn't feel patronized by you. You were not professionals. You said to me, you know what, Sia, we're trying to get a day here. We're all in this meeting, wherever people are in AA, we're trying to get another day. And some of us have been here longer and we know how to do some stuff, and we'll share our experience with you. And that's what we're doing here. That's what we're doing here. And you are not a charity case. That meant so much to me. I just felt like such a beggar when I came here, and I resented it deeply. You got through to me. I love you for that 12-step call, man. I do. So anyway, I was sitting someplace waiting for the obsession of the mind to hit, which, as I said, ran my day. And I want to talk about this for a minute because I didn't understand about this obsession of the mind thing. I underestimated it. Like I told you, I made light of it. And I kind of lumped everything together as addiction. And a lot of us are addicts in AA. But here's the difference for me. And I feel it's what I missed. And I'm grateful somehow that information got through. Addiction is normal. You use an addictive substance, you are going to get addicted to it. You, your dog, your grandma. Alcoholism is abnormal. And it ain't two alcoholics hanging out talking together in 1935 that came up with this. No disrespect to Bill and Bob. This is why Dr. Silkworth is in the big book. Dr. Silkworth, he did this little case study. I don't know if you know this, like about 30 years of watching alcoholics die around him. And he came up with this understanding. Alcoholism is an allergy. Okay, well, I have an allergy other than alcohol. I don't know if you do. I have an allergy to penicillin. I'm going to tell you something. I'll stake my life on this to every dang person in this meeting. I ain't scoring a shot of penicillin again in this lifetime. That will never happen unless some medical professional makes a mistake and gives it to me. But I also absolutely know that I will drink again if I ain't in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that is because of that second feature of alcoholism, obsession of the mind. Let me ask you something. Do you think a person allergic to peanuts, I like to call them peanaholics, you think a peanaholic is gonna pursue a peanut into the gates of insanity and death? Hell no. Somebody who's allergic to a peanut, their throat swells up, they die. Somehow we don't notice we're dying. And that is because of that weird obsession of the mind thing. And one day I was looking at that and it said, the problem centers in the mind in the book. And you know what? That was like a lightning bolt. That ain't located in a bottle. That is not in the past. I still got alcoholism here. It just ain't drunk. And that's a big deal. But I got to respect the fact I got this fatal, progressive, incurable malady. I don't know if you were in a doctor's office and they told you that's what you had. I'd get hysterical. I'd start screaming. But when you guys told me some of these things, I just blew it off. I was running my show. Anyway, so I'm sitting there waiting for the obsession of the mind to hit. And I saw something about Alcoholics Anonymous. It was a simple thing. It was in the community service section of the newspaper, I believe. It said something like, we hold hands, we pray, we don't drink anymore. Well, you know what? That sounded corny as hell to me. But then this other voice spoke up before I could bat it away. And I've heard other people in AA say this happened to them. It was a quiet voice, and it simply said, I want to go. And that voice got the swing vote that day because I was out of ideas. So if you're sitting here and you're out of ideas, it's a terrible feeling. I get it. But it's a life-saving address for an alcoholic of my type. And so here's the thing I understand. Let me tell you that I went to this meeting, and it was a nice meeting. It was a daytime meeting. And they had it going on. They had a greeter at the door. They found out I was new. They put me in the front of the meeting. Somebody said she'd sponsor me, gave me her number. And the meeting started, and I got an attack of self-centered fear. There's people there, and I hate them, And that overrode the fact I come for help. And I didn't hear a thing in that meeting. I didn't hear a thing, and I ain't calling that lady. And I taken your book, and I, forget you. That's how I was, and I went home. And then this weird thing happened a couple hours later. That thing that I cannot pay away, pray away, hide from, outwit, negotiate with, obsession of the mind, that thing was gone. And the only way that thing went any place for me is if I had a drink to shut it up. And I hadn't had one, I had to ask myself. I was shocked. And something? You would have never convinced me that Eric did it, or Val did it, or any individual alcoholic in this meeting or that one did it. I would never have bought that in a million years. But something happened. I had to admit that to myself. I'm going to tell you something. That moment is the dividing line of my life before and after. I drank again, but I could never forget you. I've been looking over my shoulder ever since, And so here's the deal. Here was the problem. I thought I had a drinking problem. And if you're here and you think you got a drinking problem, AA is going to work right for you. But I got this other thing, alcoholism. And it's not a synonym, and it's not a euphemism. It's a thing. And what I have come to understand about it is the symptom of drinking. It's like an iceberg to me. And the symptom of drinking is the tip of the iceberg. And the whole underbelly of the iceberg is spiritual malady. And the reason that I say that is I was so grateful to have the obsession lifted. Thank you, Alcoholics Anonymous. And if something comes up, I'll be right back. And it's like alcoholism was listening and it decided to oblige. And I went to a place. I was having what we have called in AA a pink cloud experience. I don't know if anybody's heard that expression. I don't hear it around too much, but I had that experience. I was leaping out of bed. I didn't have that obsession driving me and running my day. I enrolled in classes. It was unbelievable for 2 weeks. And then, full of self-reliance, which the book warns us against, I went to see somebody I always had a bad time with, and it was no different. I got mad at him like I always did, and then I blew my sobriety. Then I went back to Alcoholics Anonymous because I wanted that thing to go away, the obsession of the mind. And I'd love to ask you what line you stand in for that cup of coffee. I had no idea how to resummon that miracle. No idea. And I didn't have a sponsor. I'm telling you, if you're here and you ain't got a sponsor, yes, you do, and they're an idiot. It's you. And I'm telling you that because that's what they told me. So forgive me if it feels offensive. It really got on my wick too, but it was the truth, man. And I drifted out the door of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was gone for 11 years. A lot of us don't make it back. there wasn't a whole lot left of me by the time I got back here. So I ended up in England. I'll talk about that a little bit. And, I'm in the I Can Club. I don't know if you've joined that club yet, if you're new. It's like the first three steps, we have a shorthand. I can't is step one. Step two is God can, as you understand God. And step three is let him or her or it. And I've always been in the I Can Club, like I told you, I can't pay the rent, they evict. I can't do this, I can't. So I'm over there in England. I was modeling. That's what I called it. I don't know what you'd have called it if you'd seen it in action. And I'm like staying out all night drinking. And I show up for this job. And I look terrible. And not a vision for you, right? And they took pictures. I guess they were optimists. And we got those pictures back and they showed them to me. My face was blown and my eyes were bloodshot. We've looked a lot worse than that on many days, but that was the deal, and they were hoping for a whole lot more. And so, that was it. I was a terrible employee anyway. I'd walk down runways with dresses on backwards, walked out of my shoes, so it was like, get out, just get out. And it seems like the moment I breached the door of that agency, the Bank of England called, and I was overdrawn at the bank. I thought I had a lot of money. I don't know if that happened to you either. It's where the book says we cannot separate the true from the false. I don't know where my money went. I was shocked. And there's a thing the book says, God's everything or God's nothing. You know when God's everything for somebody like me? When there's nobody else to call. And there was a woman in that business who had seen me in action, and she broke her anonymity. And I had her phone number. Ain't that funny that I had it? Maybe somebody in me knew. And I called her and I went back to AA. And the problem with that sobriety was simply this. There's a thing the book says, a demand is different than a request. I had some demands. Giving you the privilege of my sobriety, I expected certain things to take place. And they didn't. And the deadline came and went. I don't know what it was, but we're arbitrary like that. And so I got mad. And I quit AA. There's another thing the book says, there's one who has all power, may you find him now. And you know what, that day his name was Gerald, because Gerald was trying to get me to take a geographic, if you would allow me to share in a general way. And so I met Gerald at Gatwick Airport, and we're standing in line and he's gonna take me away. And out of nowhere, these federales come swooping down and they arrest Gerald. And they arrested the tickets, which was much more upsetting to me. It's that thing in the book, take a trip, not take a trip. I didn't have program for not take a trip. And I went home and did what I do when I don't have program. I blew my sobriety. And then I did something I did not understand. I don't know if you've ever done something like that. I went back to AA. I'm sitting in those meetings and I sort of hate your guts. You didn't come through for me, whatever I thought you were supposed to do. I wasn't going to ask you what was going on. I was sick and tired. Have you ever been like that? I didn't want you telling me what was going on. I can figure it out myself, okay? And so I'm sitting there thinking about it. And eventually, what I came up with was this. I do not know what meeting I was in. And I don't know what person said whatever they said, but somebody somewhere said something where I crossed that invisible line, not the one between alcoholism and normal drinking, but the one between me and you. I identified. I never had that feeling in my life. I did not feel welcome in my family. Not their problem, my alcoholism. And I identified in AA and I was in trouble and I went home. That's what I was doing in that meeting. And at the end of that meeting, I went up to see, there was a stranger there. So I went up to talk to this stranger because I figured I'd never see him again. So it was a low risk deal, to be honest. And I was a little more honest than I would normally be, I think. And they listened politely, like we do in AA. And then it's a guy, he wrote a phone number down and he said, you know what, Sia? If you want to clean up your act, why don't you work this program as Bill sees it and not as Sia sees it? He wasn't being snarky. He just gave me this phone number, said to call this person, and then he walked away. And now I'm standing at that turning point that we talk about and how it works. And I'm going to ask God's protection and care with complete abandon. Or the unsaid thing there is I ain't. And I have stood with people in that moment and offered them the hand of AA that you offered to me. And I have said to them, give me a call, I'll be glad to help you. And a lot of times they say something to me like they can't call. And you know what? I've been around you and learned about honesty. That ain't honest, and that's a life or death decision that we make sometimes. And so I had that phone number and I dialed the phone. That's what I did because I was desperate. And because that's one of the badly wrapped gifts of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have learned to look for in my hard times. And I got an alcoholic on the phone, and they knew what they were talking about. They started talking to me about the program. They didn't know me from Adam. They took the time. That's what we do. But as they were talking, now this was Clancy. I don't know if any of you ever heard him share or knew him. He saved my life. He and AA. And he's talking and, he's good. But I've heard it. Do you know what I mean? I already heard it. So he's telling me stuff I already heard, and my heart sort of starts to sink, or something starts to sink in me. And then he says to me, if you want to clean up your act, Sia, maybe we can help you. Do you know what that's called in the book? For my money, anyway. That's the flimsy reed. It looked like nothing with a hole in it, except I was listening different. I was desperate. I heard a welcome call there. I heard it. And I got on a plane and I came to Los Angeles. I don't know what airline. Bad out of hell airlines, I guess. And, I got sober in the Pacific group. One alcoholic yelling at another. That's who we are. Stop by anytime. And I just, that was such a difficult experience. You know why? Because it was an ego busting experience, and I badly needed that. I didn't know that. I didn't know the mechanics of alcoholism. I didn't know. That's why I need a sponsor. I still need a sponsor because my ism can get ahead of me, And I'm going to talk to you a little bit. Let's see how much time I have left. 9 minutes. I'll just tell you about going to my first meeting there because they're a big group. They were so nice to me, and I was like a junkyard dog, kind of. They were giving me rides to the meetings. A woman put me up in her home, and so this guy gives me a ride to their home group, and we get there, and you know something? They didn't look like alcoholics to me. You don't particularly look like alcoholics to me either. And I got an attack of self-centered fear. And this guy that gave me a ride kind of noticed, and he said, I was having a little psychotic episode. He said, well, you're here, you might as well stay till the end of the meeting. And I remember thinking something like, easy for you to say, dirtbag, you got the car keys. And I went in the meeting, I sat down. I don't think I heard a dang thing. And at the end of the meeting, I got up and I'm heading for the exit. I'm getting out of there. And I would love to know, is what I mean, where I thought I was going now. Because I'm going to tell you, my resume at that time looked like this, sort of in a nutshell. At that point, I had been uninvited to one entire country, thank you very much. I was living illegally in another country, and they knew that. And I knew they knew that. So it was like a question of time, right? So uncomfortable. I could live so uncomfortably. I told you I'd been uninvited to every organization I ever became a part of, my family included. And I had a secret, of course, we often do, which was that I was married to 2 people at the same time. And when one of them found out, I tried to treat it like an accounting problem. And they said, what do you mean you lost count? It ain't a high number, 1, 2, so I wasn't working my way out of problems very well. And so I was heading for the exit, and this guy intercepted me, and he goes, how would you like a coffee commitment? And at that point, I was so, I don't know what I was, but I just felt like saying, how would you like me to kick your ass? You know, I was just so scared, so at the end of my rope, so like, oh, this ain't it, I don't know what to do now. And I said instead, because I'm a chicken, I said, well, I'm only going to be here 2 weeks, so I can't take a commitment. And without missing a beat, this guy saved my life because he said, okay, take it for 2 weeks. And I couldn't come up with a whopper fast enough. You know what I'm saying? It was like I sold myself into white slavery or something. I was so dang mad. And here's what happened there. I didn't know it exactly then, but I understand it now because I was spiritually illiterate. Something happened in that moment that had eluded me my first times in AA. It is the unicorn of my sobriety. It is the thing I protect against all things, especially me. It is the pilot light of my sobriety, and it is called surrender. And I don't think I did surrender. I think I was surrendered by the sobriety in that room and the structure of that meeting and the people who talked as they talked in the meeting. I think it all came together in some remarkable gift from the higher power, the we of AA. I think that's what happened. And you know what it reminds me of? I'm an excellent swimmer, but I underestimated a situation one time, just like I underestimated alcoholism. And I was drowning. And I was drowning. And I mean, I was trying. I used to swim competitively. I was no way. I just couldn't get out of this problem, this wave after wave. And so, you know, I was drifting somewhere at the bottom, and that was it. And then out of nowhere, I got my feet on something. I don't know what it was, so I could get my head out of water, and I got some air. You know, I lived. It was such a surprise. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous is to me. It's like this surprise. It's a shocking thing. I hear things differently in this sobriety. And my sobriety date ain't something great that happened to me all those years ago, and that's it. Like something great that happened in Bethlehem. No disrespect. This is a growing thing. More and more is revealed, and more is given to me in this. I ain't here to promote AA either. You know, we have a tradition against that. All I'm telling you, if you're new, is nothing else helped me. I had nothing left, nowhere to go when I came here. And AA did more than I could have. I wouldn't have believed you. I wouldn't have believed you, you know. And so I got a few minutes left. I'm going to just tell you about a couple things that feel remarkable to me, maybe just one. I hate people, as I told you, and a couple of the people I hated were my parents. My mom was an Al-Anon without a program, and she had a nervous breakdown. She'd scream a lot. And I thought, you know, don't people know what's going on in this house? I hated her guts. I was never gonna forgive her, you know. And you guys said to me, that's called a resentment, Sia. And that is the number one offender. That's a pretty high number, if you never noticed that. And you want to drink again, you go right ahead. Otherwise, you're going to take some contrary action and be of service to your mother. So I would do that, and I kept score. I don't know if anybody else did, because I was pretty sure AA was going to screw me here, you know. Pardon my language. And I did that for a while. And I guess I did it, the only way I can explain it to myself is I must have done it to a point where I didn't have a big chip on my shoulder. Because my mother told me something she'd never told me before one day. She told me when she was a little girl, she'd gone someplace and she was assaulted. She tried to tell her mom about this, and I guess her mom couldn't believe her or wouldn't believe her. And I don't know how many times this happened to my mom, but when my mom divulged that to me, it was like a non-AA fifth step, I guess. She collapsed. She was sobbing at my feet. And as I looked at my mother, here's what I was thinking about. Something like that happened to me when I was a kid too. I'll wrap it up. And I thought, I ain't ever telling anybody about this. I'll die before I do that. And UNAA said to me, look, you can keep that resentment, Sia. You can pitch a tent over your secrets, the things you hate, or you can give it to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had divested myself of that. And as I looked at my mother, I realized this was a promise that came true for me in AA. I was healed. I was healed. That didn't hold me prisoner anymore. My mom did not have AA. I'm the big book in my family. You're the big book in yours. If you've been in this road, you know what I'm saying. And my time is up. I'm sorry I went over a little bit, but I want to thank you guys for the 12-step call you paid on me.